Hello everybody, and welcome to this exclusive conversation with VR expert and co-founder of Mesmerize, Andrew Hawken. My name is Matt Bachensky. I'm the global head of marketing content for the enterprise VR team here at Meta, and I'll be putting the big questions to Andrew in just a moment. But before we get started, let's take a minute to set the scene. In the last 18 months, there's been a lot of talk about the metaverse, and especially about what it might mean for the future of work. But we're not here to talk about the future. We're here to talk about a technology that is already changing the way businesses work today. That technology, of course, is virtual reality. Virtual reality is having a huge impact on the way companies approach corporate learning and development, providing many of the same benefits as on-the-job training, but without the costs, risks, and complexities. There's nobody I can think of that's better placed to tell us more about VR for L&D than Andrew. So, let's get into it. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
Tell us a bit, first of all, about your journey into VR and how you came to found Mesmerize.
Sure. So it actually goes back quite a long time. So in my career, I was a Night Editor of the Day program, BBC Current Affairs, traveled the world, full into great journalism, and I had this real moment where I thought the consumer internet in '96 would be the start of, it's like the dawn of radio, dawn of television. And I really wanted to be in it. So I left my great job at the BBC and joined Microsoft and rode that first consumer internet wave for 10 years. UK, Europe, went to the Pacific Northwest, moved my family there, and then came back to Sky for 10 years. And in 2016, I had exactly the same sensation. It was kind of gut instinct, but also tempered with some reasoning, that I felt we were going to see another huge shift in the next generation of the internet. And part of my role at Sky was to work with the big tech companies, and I could see the level of investment and the thinking that was going on there. And so I decided, actually, I wanted to be right back at the forefront of things again. And as opposed to doing it in a company with 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 people, I went out on my own, met my co-founder, Dallas Ismetchi, and we kind of founded the company in 2016. And it was part of, in my mind, it was a sense of my whole career feels like I've been chased by developments in technology all the way through my career and just trying to keep ahead of it. And I felt this is another amazing wave of innovation was coming, and I wanted to be right back at the forefront. So that's why I founded the company in 2016.
So, I mean, it's a huge risk that you took. So I'm always interested to hear, did you have a kind of a personal, like a light bulb moment with VR? What was it that gave you the confidence to take such a big step?
Yeah, so there definitely were. So I felt there were sort of three or four things that were really guiding my decision. One was once I experienced the VR technology, and I remember there was an initial Oculus film where you were roaming with dinosaurs and things like that.
Right,
and that was one of those moments where you, oh wow, this is very different to looking at this in a 2D screen. I feel like I'm really there. So there was that. Second, it was also this sense that I could see, I just felt that, Facebook as it was then, was going to get big into this, Apple, Microsoft. I felt like the tech giants were really going to invest in this thing, and I thought that was an opportunity. And part of it was also the desire to create something from scratch. I wanted to look back on my career and say, had a great time in corporate life, did well, but then, founded something, was right on the forefront and grew from an idea to a company. So that was the other thing that was really driving me here.
So cut to, what are we now, sort of 6, 7 years later?
Yep.
What most excites you about the potential of VR today?
I think there are many things that are really exciting. I think one is we've seen the headsets, just in the time that we've been in business, it's gone from very, very kind of cumbersome, expensive headsets with wires and you're tethered, massive gaming laptop. And it was very hard to set up. So if I was ever going to do a demo for a client, I would always take a developer with me because it was just so complex. And then there was a really critical moment. I think this is where the Quest just made a huge difference, because suddenly there was a device that was portable, didn't need wires, you could stand alone, you could just turn up with this device, connect to Wi-Fi, and you were away. So what I definitely see is a hardware route where these devices get lighter, more portable, and I think they become an intrinsic part of the way we work. So that's one thing. And then I think there's a whole range of new, exciting opportunities to transform a whole range of different industries. And when we start to work with companies, we're really trying to understand, they've got to get, okay, what is this technology? How do I experience it? Then how do I put it to use?
Yeah.
And for me, it's really about actually you've got to make these indispensable things that really help businesses drive more value, rather than being, a tick in a box that, we've got a VR metaverse plan. Yeah. So I think for me, it's really about how this becomes a kind of fundamental part of your working life. And we've always believed that you don't do everything in VR. Trying to do spreadsheets in VR, why would you do that? Do that on a device that's made for really that kind of productivity. But when you want to be really co-present and in the same space and have a different kind of conversation with someone who is thousands of miles away, then this really works. I mean, that was the other key moment for me in gatherings when we did our first real meetings with someone in Los Angeles, Seattle, New York, London. We're all in the same space, spatial audio. It feels like we're together. We're looking at the same things. Yeah. And you get a real different sense as opposed to, you're stuck in your room looking at a screen.
Yeah. So talking about actually the things that VR, doesn't necessarily do that well, or isn't really designed for you, saying you wouldn't do a spreadsheet, for instance, in VR. I think it's interesting when we think about what are some of the biggest myths that you have heard about VR that you think we should be sort of tackling head on? Because there's so much hype out there. There are so many kind of opinions out there. But as somebody who's already been in the thick of it for some time now, I'm really interested to kind of get from you, what are some of the myths that you think need to be busted?
Yes, so I think one is that it's just for gamers. So that it clearly is for gamers, but there are also lots of really good enterprise business cases coming in. So I think that's one, that it's not just an entertainment thing. Yeah. There is a business application. The other ones we hear are, when we work with a company, they're like, the last thing they also want to think about is, how do I get the headsets? So part of what we've done is to try and take away the pain of headset logistics, because that's definitely
right.
There's a general feeling that this is going to be complicated, difficult, and what we try to do is really ease that by providing we can deliver the headsets. We have an amazing team that onboards people, so they get the sense of, okay, this isn't that difficult.
Yeah.
The one that always comes up is this going to make me nauseous? And we've talked a lot about how we optimize frame rates and things like that, and we have, a locomotion method that doesn't, cause that. So I think that's one that comes up. Another one I think is is this really going to drive business value? And I think the more that you can demonstrate, okay, this isn't a gimmick, this is part of something that's your work setup would include this, so driving that kind of ROI, I think, is kind of key.
Yeah. We're going to talk about business value in just a second. One of the things that we hear quite a bit is more around demographics. And we used to get this, again, back when we were Facebook, we used to get this with mobile as well. It's all very well if you have a company full of millennials or young people who are going to grasp this, but I have multi-generational and I don't think this is for me. Is that something that you hear, and do you kind of have a take on whether VR, is a technology that is accessible to different age groups?
I think it definitely is. I mean, we haven't heard that a lot, but I think it's definitely accessible for all generations. I mean, we've seen, not only gaming, but we've seen it being used for patients, for the elderly. I think there's a whole wide applicability of kind of VR. I think one of the other things I think that's important is that, still headset adoption, we're not at the stage of a phone, mobile phone. And so this sense that you can have these experiences in 2D as well as in a headset, I think is one of the other big barriers. How does that really work together seamlessly? How can you get the same level of interaction if you're not in a headset as the person in a headset?
Yeah.
So that's one of the barriers that I think also comes up. What do I do if I haven't got my headset with me?
Yeah.
Am I excluded from something? So I think that's one of the other key things.
Yeah. So let's talk about that business impact. To begin with, why did you choose for Mesmerize? Why did you choose sort of learning and training? What was the opportunity that you saw there? And why did you think that VR was the solution?
Yeah, so the way we've thought about it, we have a kind of pretty wide approach and quite a wider portfolio. So we've done things like remote collaboration, for example, with the Gatherings application. And we've used that application as a way of allowing people to be together while very, very distant. So we felt that there were some real, when you start to think about spatial audio, how that can make you really engaged more. So when we've thought about this, it's...
Can you just explain spatial audio for anybody who might not be familiar with
Sure. So I think one of the things that we really believe in with this is the sense of undivided attention. So when you're in a headset, you can't really multitask. So you're fully present in that experience. Yeah. And one of the key moments of that, one of the key factors of that is the sense of spatial audio, so that when you're in an environment together, the sound comes from where the person is. And that makes a huge difference, because what you see is as people just get into discussions, they kind of naturally form semicircles or circles, and then as someone talks, people move towards the sound, and that spatial gives you a real sense of the co-presence. It's a very important element of it.
Okay.
So I think one thing we thought about was undivided attention. We also believe that there are some really kind of key things that you can achieve in levels of engagement. And then, there's things like the simulation that, you can rehearse things that are intrinsically dangerous in a non-dangerous environment.
Yeah.
So there are a whole kind of raft of things like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that impact and that value. Can you give us some specific examples of companies that you have worked with, perhaps that you're working with now, where you are seeing real change driven by this technology?
Yeah, so there's a couple of good examples. So only a couple of weeks ago, we did a medical training experience, which was undergrads from King's in a lecture and clinical presentation with head and neck surgeons from Sir Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital.
We should probably let's be specific for any international viewers. King's is presumably King's College London.
Correct.
Versus King Charles, who does not yet officially endorse anything that's happening here.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yet. Yeah, so the scenario there is 14 undergraduates and 2 kind of real experts in head and neck surgery. So one of them was actually away on holiday, so a long way away. So we created an ecosystem within the Gatherings application, and then we got headsets to everyone involved, and then we trained them, we onboarded them, we showed them how VR worked, and they had their own private ecosystem. And in that ecosystem, the various surgeons delivered clinical presentations, they delivered lectures, and then we had a 3D model of a heart. So what I was saying about the sense of them being in the same room, then they can gather around that model, and they can talk about exactly the structure of the model in a new way. So the feedback was fantastic, from the presenters who thought they were really engaging with these students in a new way, and from the students who said, that was amazing. It wasn't anywhere near as hard as I thought it was going to be to do, and we could see this, this is like revolutionary. We could see the future of medical education being here. Yeah. So I think it goes back to those themes we were talking about, which was sense of being present. So they were physically separate, but actually they were really inhabiting the same space. The presenter, we kind of coached the presenter on how to present in VR, because that's a new skill. So he did the lecture, they had Q&A, they had networking, and then they gathered around this model, in a way that would be very hard to do in any other medium. So that was a really good example for us of where we think this is going.
And for them, is it a one-off? Is it sort of a test, an experiment, or are they looking at this as a scalable practice that they can kind of roll out to students everywhere? Yeah,
so I think that this follows very much the same pattern, which is you have to do something first. So the idea is absolutely that we would scale this out, but you can't even get past that first hurdle without showing people how this works. So we've now got a range of surgeons who've experienced it. One of our advisory board members, Asida Aurora, has really helped us kind of think about this, and we've now got students who've seen it. We've got a great use case. It's something that, as opposed to a PowerPoint presentation that says we could do this, we've done it, and that really helps in terms of showing what can be done.
So I remember, because I was here when mobile was really kind of accelerating for us. And I remember one of the things I used to think when it came to mobile, when we were kind of pitching mobile ads at that time, probably against Sky actually, his TV model. But I always remember thinking, why doesn't everybody do this? I was so convinced that we were right and that this was where engagement and this is where eyeballs were going. Why doesn't everybody do this? With VR, it's easy to sometimes have that same sense and kind of get lost in that. Like the potential of this is so profound. Why isn't everybody doing it like right now? But presumably there are very concrete answers to that question. Like what stands in the way of a King's College London or a Guy's rolling this out, or not even just though, of every hospital or every teaching practice in the world kind of like rolling this out tomorrow? What are the hurdles that we need to overcome?
So I think first of all, you've got to be able to prove that this actually works. Then you've got to get the engagement of the right team in the organization to say, okay, I believe in it, now we're going to go. But then there are hurdles around logistics, headsets, provision,
the practicalities.
The practicalities of that stuff, exactly, yeah. So I think that there are lots of hurdles in terms of how you scale. But for example, another one I was going to tell you about is the work we've done with TD Bank, which is one of the biggest North American financial institutions. So the way we engaged with them was with a consulting company we went in together called Capco. And the way we started that was really identify, the global head of innovation.
Yeah.
And so we worked with him and the whole executive team to show what is possible. Again, created the ecosystem. They could do meetings, presentations, networking events, etc. So that was getting the executive team to really buy into this. And from them, they were then saying, okay, now what's a real use case that we could, it's great for us as executive team, good.
Yeah.
What's a real use case? So what we've just done recently is a 4-month program with a kind of 100 interns who were new to the company. And again, what we did for them was they could meet the executives. So these were scattered people all over the North America. So they were never going to come together in the same place. And so what we did with them is networking events where they're in the same place. They meet the executives. They did some training sessions. And again, it was, for us, a real proof that you can do this at scale. So 100 people, all around, all remote. So logistically, that's a challenge, but we can absolutely kind of conquered that one, and that not only the executives but the interns found that really useful. So great feedback from the interns. They posted on LinkedIn a lot about how effective this was. The HR team at TD Bank are delighted by the results. So again, that's the way that this needs to go. You've got to find the key decision makers. You've got to find a project to do to prove it can scale, and then it's analyzing return on investment.
Return on investment, I mean, and proof. These are the key terms, aren't they? Because we'll have people watching this who are maybe curious about VR, beginning to be interested, but we know that's a question that kind of comes up a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Show me the numbers. What's the ROI if I invest in this?
Yeah.
How do you are you seeing ROI figures, or how do you kind of have those conversations with your potential customers?
Yes, I think there's two things that matter. I think one is saving money, and one is making money. And so on the saving money, when you start to think about actually people haven't had to travel, they've got a level of engagement that is really kind of high. It's a pretty easy case to make, that you can do events without incurring all of that cost. So, for example, we did a big project with a fashion technology company called Minetti, and we had 150. They would normally bring their executive team together. They are literally spread around the world. But we ran a kind of all-hands event for them over 3 days, where they had presentations, they did quizzes, scavenger hunts, networking, and again, a real successful event. But that meant that they didn't bring all of those people from around the world together, so huge saving there. Also, you kind of think everyone's got, these net zero targets, suddenly there's a real kind of powerful case there. So I think the the way we've thought about this is there's employee engagement, which feels good, and then there's how does that extend to their customers. Now that one's harder to get right, but we're definitely kind of working on that one. So I think we can show the story on both sides. Yeah.
Has that story become, or that sell become kind of simpler for you in a way post COVID? Because I'm fascinated that you guys have been around. I mean, 2016 makes you quite tenured in the VR, certainly in the enterprise VR field. I'm interested in how you've seen the market change, because certainly we talk a lot about the impact of hybrid and distributed and remote work, and you've mentioned presence a few times, which we think of as being kind of the fundamental of VR, right? The feeling that people can be connected and be present together in a single space. So have you sort of seen a kind of a COVID bump in a way, because these ideas around employee engagement experience are now kind of top of mind for people?
Yes, so I think that there are a number of things that kind of accelerated things. I think one was the headsets becoming cheaper, portable, more powerful, easier to operate. That was one. Clearly, when we had the pandemic, there was suddenly everything was remote. And again, that definitely gave impetus to lots of development about that. We saw that with Zoom and Teams. Suddenly people were operating in a different environment. So we were part of that. And I think where we are right now, we're in a different work environment that is hybrid. And it also seems to depend very much on geography. So London feels like everyone's back. It does feel absolutely, the tube isn't quite as crammed as it used to be, but there's definitely a lot of people in the centre. So it feels like that's sort of come back to a more normal environment. But I still think there's a lot of hybrid work in that. I don't think people are in 5 days a week.
No.
And they're not in from 8 till 5. It's just it's changed that environment.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely an important thing when you start to think about co-presence, how you use VR for the right things.
Yeah.
But I think in the US, it feels to me, my experience so far is that there's been less of a return to work, and that when people relocated, they didn't move to Buckinghamshire or Hertfordshire, they moved to Nebraska.
1,000 miles away,
Yeah, so my experience so far of the US cities is there's less kind of return to work at the moment, and more hybrid, more remote working.
Yeah.
So I think we're definitely in a new paradigm in terms of work, and I think that all of this technology can play a real role in kind of helping get that sense of connection.
Yeah.
If you're not seeing everyone at the same time all the time.
Yeah. So I want to talk for a little bit before we finish here around kind of next steps and how people get started if they are interested. So I'd love for you to begin thinking about all the experiences that you've had in VR over the years, all of the projects that you've seen, the pilots that you've run, the successes that you've had. What do you think are the key insights that you can share with people watching this, or kind of business leaders, to help them approach the opportunity to approach VR in the right way? What are kind of the key lessons that they need to learn?
Yes, I think there are a few. I think one is it's now is a good time. I think the headsets are in a good place, and if you were doing this a few years ago, it'd be much more complex.
Yeah.
So I think that is one. I think there's now a new work reality that means actually that you can really take advantage of this. I think one of the other things, we have a number of kind of, in the Mesmerize group, a number of studios, and one of them is born building out a kind of hard skills training platform, particularly for aviation. You can see that there's some really strong use cases in that kind of scenario. And I think it's really understanding, the way I would think about it is, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? And from there, how can VR help you solve that problem? That's the way we kind of approach it, which is, okay, is it an employee engagement problem? Is it a sense that the people don't know the culture of the company? Are they not connected to their colleagues in the same way? So I think it's sort of starting with the business problem, and then companies like ourselves can help solve that problem and give, this is the right way to go from all of the years of experience we've had of this, that we've got a real lot of expertise in terms of how to solve it. But that's the way I would do it. I would think about what is the problem or the opportunity that as a business I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, it's interesting because I suppose that the temptation is to, again, if you go back to all the hype and the headlines, just feeling like I should have a strategy.
Right.
I need to have a VR strategy because it's going to be a thing. So let's get VR and then we'll kind of figure it out. But presumably the companies that you see that approach it that way have less success than the companies who put the
I think you just end up with a bunch of headsets on a desk somewhere. You know. I think that's the way we've always thought about this. We want to actually drive real business value, because I think if you can't do that, then it's a one-off pilot that doesn't turn into anything. So that would be the way I would suggest to approach it.
Yeah. So last question. I want you to gaze into your crystal ball for us and predict what the VR for work space is going to look like in, let's say, 2 years, 5 years, and then 10 years.
Okay.
And then we're going to post this in 2, 5, and 10 years and hold you entirely responsible for these predictions.
Okay, so I think where we are 2 years, I think a lot of this will be driven by the tech, because these scenarios are enabled by advances in the technology in the headsets and things like edge compute, 5G, all those things that are possible. So 2 years, I think we'll have a new generation of headsets. I think we'll be roughly in the same kind of environment, I think. 5 years, I think we will be in a very, very different place. I mean, you look at the journey over the last 5 years, it's been pretty immense.
Yeah.
So I think in the next 5 years, I think we'll have devices that are AR, VR. I think they'll be much more lightweight. There'll be cloud rendering. I think you'll have an environment where you can have, you can bring in holograms next to you. You can present, your entire workspace can just be whatever you want it to be. And I think it'll be a thing that's persistent, as opposed to a device you put on and take off. I think that will be the real step change in my mind. It will be that the hardware and the associated technology to support that kind of cloud rendering, etc., will be there. I think AI is going to play a huge role in this as well. So we know that. I think sustainability is going to drive a lot of change as well. So I believe that that's where we'll be in 5. 10 years, I've absolutely got no idea. I've absolutely no idea. But 5 years, I think we will be in a world where the hardware has shifted, so that it enables some really exciting scenarios, and I think it will become the norm. Probably that's where we are in 10 years. It's become the norm.
Yeah. So this is where I'd love to do some kind of like reveal for people watching this, where all of this kind of fades away and we reveal that all along we are holograms.
Exactly. Yeah.
All of this has taken place in a virtual environment, but as you said, we're probably 5 to 10 years away from that. Well, that is all we've got time for for now. But thank you so much for answering these questions, and thank you to everybody who's given up their time to listen in. If you want to know more about VR for work, head over to forwork.meta.com, where you can check out our range of MetaQuest VR headsets, learn more about VR solutions, or easily schedule a call with one of our experts. And if you want to learn more about Mesmerize, just head to mesmerizevr.com. Goodbye.